Hi, I'm Jonah from the Rand McNally product team. Thank you so much for joining us as we take a quick tour of the Rand platform. The Rand platform is all about bringing your fleet data into one place and giving you key actions and insights for your business. We're going to do what we call a little bit of a greatest hits tours today. So we're going to go through some key modules in the platform, starting with the Fleetmap, which is home of our live tracking and operations, jumping into the assets module, which is where our maintenance and management tools live, followed by reports, which is where you can take some of the key rich data that you're getting and turn it into insights for your fleet, and then ending off with workflows, which is our drag and drop automation and alerts builder. Let's get into it. All right, here we are in Rand platform. So right now we're on the Fleetmap, which is home of our live tracking and kind of key insights section. Before we jump into it, I'll just give you a little bit of a lay of the land of some of the different modules and functionality we've got in the platform. Up the top here, we've got access to all our different modules, a few of which we'll cover today. On the right side here, we've got access to things like our profile, our support, and a little drop-down menu that contains some other things like workflows. On the right side here, we've got our map where we can see the current location of all our assets in the fleet. Obviously, it's hopefully looking familiar. It's based on Google Maps. We'll jump into that in a second. On the left, we've got a list of all our assets which are currently on board the platform. A key thing to note, and this makes Rand platform a little bit different, is that all the assets we're looking at in this list might not necessarily have the same device or even a device. Once again, it's all about bringing the whole fleet together in one place. Some of these might have asset trackers, some of these might have cameras or vehicle trackers, or some of these might have a combination. And the beauty of Rand platform is the way that we run our asset management and maintenance allows you to track things that don't even have a device. So some of these things in the fleet we might not even be tracking, but once again, they're all in the same place. Let's go ahead and turn our attention to the map and let's zoom in on an asset, maybe this guy here, local fleet 2. First of all, if I want to zoom in and get a really good idea of what he's currently up to, I absolutely can. Let's go ahead and toggle on some of our map layers, make it a little bit more interesting. Say we switch to satellite and we're starting to get a better picture of where this asset is currently located. There's lots of different overlays you can activate on Rand platform, including things like traffic, weather overlays, and other important information. But for now, let's go ahead and change it back to default, expand that back out, and let's tap on this asset and take a look. When we do this, we can see some important information. So we've got the name of the asset here, the group that he currently belongs to. We can see the street address, or if it's inside a geofence we've made, it'll show the name of the geofence. If he was on the move, it would show us his current speed. And if you're using the driver management functionality, it's going to show you who's currently behind the wheel. So with driver management, there's a few different ways you can assign a driver, whether that be at a fleet management level through the portal that we're looking at now, or you can also get your drivers to download the iOS or Android Rand McNally app, and they can assign themselves to fleet vehicles from there. The timestamp is going to show us the current time, or the last time that we heard from this particular asset. And if we go ahead and hit history, it's just going to give us a nice overview of what this vehicle's been doing the last 24 hours or so. So important thing to note on Rand platform is that all your data is stored indefinitely. If you want to access it through your reports and go back to 1 year ago, 3 months ago for this particular asset, you absolutely can. But the fleet map is all about making it useful in the moment. What's useful for you in your day-to-day operations. So what we're looking at here is the last 24 hours of history for this particular asset. And it plays a bit like a YouTube video. So we can go ahead and scrub through. The little blue graph that you can see down the bottom there, that represents speed. But I can also change that speed to be different parameters that we're receiving from the vehicle. So maybe I want to see the RPM or the engine temperature or anything like that. I can start to overlay and really investigate what's been going on with this vehicle. Another key thing that this functionality will do is it will start to overlay important things on top of the breadcrumb trail. So for example, here we can see these blue squares. These are nice simple stops, so they're telling us when the vehicle arrived and stopped at a location, what time it departed. Perhaps this is a customer site or a particular delivery that we had to do. But other things will populate on the map as well, depending on the combination of devices that you're using. If you have RVT camera, for example, it might display important driver behavior events, things like distracted driving, using the cell phone, speeding, or if you're using a GX6 vehicle tracker, it might be things like harsh braking, harsh acceleration. Once again, it doesn't matter what you're tracking and what device you're using it, it's showing you the information in the same way and helping you get the key insights you need. Let's go ahead and jump back to the map now, and we'll mix it up a bit, and let's have a quick look at geofencing. So let's jump to the fences tab. We go ahead and hit fence management. If you're familiar with geofencing, it basically allows you to highlight a particular area on the system that's of importance. And that leads to some other functionality. Say you want to report on how long you've spent in a particular fence, you want to log your interactions when you enter and leave a geofence, or maybe you want to do some really cool stuff, which we'll get to a little bit later, which is start to set up some automatic alerts and automation when your vehicles interact with these fences. But for now, let's focus on how to actually create a geofence. If you're familiar with some other platforms out there, perhaps in the past you might have to import geofences using Latin long coordinates. It's normally a big old spreadsheet that you've got to put into the system. We can support that if you like, but the beauty of RAM platform is that you can actually draw geofences directly onto the map as you go. So if we go ahead and select one of our geofence tools here, we've got our different creation shapes we can use. I might actually switch it to satellite so we can get a better overview of what we're trying to geofence. And let's say, for example, that this particular parking lot we've got here is one of our depot sites. All I got to do is click and drag and connect up those points, and we've got a geofence. I can go ahead and give it a name. I can change the color. I can give it a description. Now when any one of my assets enter this particular fence, first of all, it's going to tell me, it's going to create an event, but I can start to combine it with some other functionality like my reports and report on how long I've spent in this particular fence, or maybe I want to receive an SMS and I can set that up via drag and drop in our workflows. So geofences hopefully is something that you might be familiar with in the industry. The key thing on RAM platform is just how easy they are to use. It's a lot of fun to create them, and you can create as many as you like. Let's jump back to the map now. And the last thing we'll just cover before we move on to the next section, which is our asset maintenance and management portal, is we'll just drop down our filters and we'll start to give you a bit of an idea of how you can start to reflect your organization and your fleet in RAM platform. First of all, on the left here, we have access to all our different groups. A lot of our customers like to group their fleet and vehicles together, maybe by where the depot they go back to at the end of the night, by who's in charge of that particular group of assets. This is really about helping to reflect the structure of your organization. In the middle here, these colorful labels, these things are called tags. They start off very simple. It's a bit like the old label maker. You can say, okay, this is a diesel truck, this is a heavy haulage truck, this is a generator. But once again, it gets a little bit more richer in functionality. You can start to use these to control visibility as well. So you might have particular tags that you say only particular people in the business can view these assets. It's a really powerful way you can start to control visibility. On the right side here, we've got some more standard stuff like what type of asset it is, but you can also filter by if it's on the move or if it's stationary and you want to investigate why it's not on the road. So that brings us to the end of a little bit of a quick tour of the Fleetmap and live tracking. And now we can go ahead and jump into our assets module and take a look there. And welcome to the assets module on the platform. So once again, it's about bringing our whole fleet together in one place. So it doesn't matter what you're tracking, whether it's a generator, a delivery bike, a truck, it all gets an asset in the system and all lives in the same place. So we're looking at all the vehicles we've currently got added into RAM platform. You can see here it's going to show you some pretty vital information right from the get-go, things like the VIN number, the license and registration number, the make and model, and where your asset is currently located. But let's take a bit of a deeper dive and let's look at one in particular. Maybe we'll start with local fleet 2, which is the one we actually looked at on the map. Clicking through, that's going to take us to the individual page for this asset. And up the top, we can see there's a lot of important information that it's going to give us straight off the bat. Things like the label, which is the name of the asset. And you can customize that to be anything to match up with how you run your fleet. We've got the group that it's currently assigned to. In this instance, it's assigned to Depot 1. If you also have team members in the business who are responsible for Depot 1, you can assign those users and assets together. And that'll also start to limit the visibility. So if they don't need to see assets that are in other depots or in other departments, they won't have visibility over them. We've also got our current driver field. So if there is a driver allocated, we can go ahead and allocate them here. Alternatively, they also have the option to do it through the mobile app as well. Down the bottom, we've got our colorful tags. This is where we can come and create and apply tags against our vehicles. Some basic information like our license plate, our make and model, and here we've got the VIN number. Something really powerful about RAM platform is it features automatic vehicle onboarding. So when you first onboard your fleet, particularly if you're using the vehicle tracker, you plug the device in, it detects the VIN number of the vehicle, runs that through a VIN decoding engine, and automatically populates a lot of information about the vehicle. If we go ahead and jump to the info tab down the bottom here, This is going to show us some of the information that it has pulled from vendor coding. What this allows you to do is make onboarding really quick and simple. So rather than having to go through and fill out lots of boring information about all your fleet vehicles, it automates that and takes the stress out of it. Down the bottom, we've got access to all our different management and info tabs. So for example, if we jump to notes, that's a bit like a running dialogue that'll show quick notes or quick mentions to people in the team of things specific to this vehicle. Reminders is home of our smart maintenance functionality, so you can increment reminders based off how the vehicle is being used. So it doesn't necessarily have to be the date and time that you might know a service is due. You can actually start to do it based off things like the odometer reading or the runtime of the engine. In particular, if it's plant and equipment, is particularly useful. If we go ahead and select odometer here, and we can make one quickly. So let's say we know that we have a logbook service due. For this particular asset, the odometer reading is 10,000 miles. And we know that we have to get one done at 11,000. And we might ask for a reminder at 10,500. And if we get to 12,000 miles and we still haven't done our service or our safety inspection, we're in trouble and we really want to know about it. So each one of these stages is going to give us a reminder, both as an email, and it's going to live in a bright red color against the asset as well. And we can select anyone in the business to be responsible for that. Go ahead and hit complete, and that reminder is now created. Whoever's responsible for that can come in and complete it and maintain that as needed. Obviously, we're looking at an individual asset level. When you're dealing with a large fleet, you can do this across a fleet level as well, and all of that lives in our reports module. Down the bottom, some other important tabs that you might use, things like our trips tab. That's going to give you the movement history of this particular asset, to show you where and when it's been. We can see it went from point A to point B. That's how long the trip was. That was who was behind the wheel. And over time, it'll also start to build up a safety score against your driver. So if you choose to use some of our driver safety functionality, every trip that's recorded against an asset can also be recorded against the driver who was behind the wheel. Start to build a safety score for them. We will just focus quickly on fault codes. So if we jump back to an asset, you may notice a little bit earlier that did have a fault code against it. It's going to show up as a little warning light here. So the GX6 vehicle tracker, when it detects a fault, it's going to send that information into the platform. There's a couple of different ways that you can know about it. It's going to then display this engine fault icon as we can see here. Alternatively, it's accessible through your reports. You can go to a fault code report, choose any date range you like, and report on all the faults received over that particular time period. Or where it starts to get really cool is when you combine that with our workflows, which we'll cover in our last module, which actually goes through and you can set up custom alerts and automation when you start to receive these faults. So key takeaway for the asset module, once again, it's all about bringing all your assets together. Doesn't matter what you're tracking or how you're tracking it. It's about taking ownership of the management, being able to reflect where exactly in the organization this asset lives and who's responsible for it, and being able to automate some of the maintenance functionality. Moving on from this, in a few quick moments, we'll take a look at some of our reports and how you can take some of this key data that we saw and make some useful insights for your fleet. Awesome, welcome to our reports module. So this is where we can start to take some of the key data that we're getting through and turn it into insights specific for our fleet. So if we open up our reports drop down here, first thing you're going to notice is that there's a lot of different default reports in the system. But before we jump into any of those, something really key to cover is that RAN platform is what we call events-based. So before, when we spoke about bringing the whole fleet together into one place, doesn't matter what you're tracking and what device you're using, it turns everything into what we call an event. And the beauty of that is that you can then report on any event that comes into the system. So you can really start to make it specific to what you actually want to report on. Best way to explain that is, let's go ahead and jump into our events report first. I'll just clear my filters here. So we're reporting on our events across the fleet. This is probably the most in-depth information that you're going to get in the system, but it really starts to illustrate the amount of reporting that's possible. So if we go ahead and expand out our filters here, we can start to see all the different types of events that we can report on. So they might be things like harsh events to do with safety, like harsh cornering, harsh braking. They might be media events to do with our particular camera. For example, this little purple event here, that's going to be things like distracted driving or eating and drinking while behind the wheel. And all of that comes through as what we call an event. And each one of these events is a bit like a data packet. So if I go ahead and filter it to a GX6, for example, which is our vehicle tracker, we can start to have a look under the hood at some of the rich information we're receiving. So if we open up one of these events, first of all, it's going to give us a little bit of a summary of some of the information we're receiving from CAN bus through J1939. We've got some key parameters here like engine RPM, things like odometer, things like the speed, the wheelbase speed that's coming through, all populates in our report here. The key takeaway here is the amount of information that's actually there. There's a lot you can report on, but obviously we don't want analysis paralysis. We want to turn this into key insights, and that's when some of our other reports come into it. So the next layer above our events is to start to report on some of the insights we're getting. So things like our trips report, that's going to show us exactly where our vehicles have been. They started at A, ended at B, how long this particular trip was, what was the average speed, the distance they traveled, who was the driver behind the wheel, all the way through to something like a time in fence report, which will make good sense based on what we spoke about when we looked at the Fleetmap. This is going to show us when we entered a fence, when we exited the fence, how long we were there for. Let me go ahead and clear our filter so it'll give us a little bit more information. And I'll hit go. We can see the name of the asset, when they entered, when they exited, the duration they're inside that fence for, and the name of the fence. Key thing to know about reports as well is that any report that you find, particularly if you filter down to something nice and specific, maybe you've applied a few tags, you're only reporting on one particular group of assets, you can start to schedule this report and automate that so you don't have to manually come in here every time. So let's say this time in fence report was particularly important, you wanted to schedule that. Let's go ahead and hit schedule, and I can tell myself when I want to receive it. So let's say I want to receive this report weekly. I want to receive it every Monday morning at 7 AM, so it's ready, waiting in my inbox when I get into work. It's going to give me the last 7 days worth of information. I want it as a CSV file so I can take it into Excel, do some Excel magic, and I can go ahead and choose exactly who I want to send it to. A lot of our customers also automate this to send to their customers. So if you have a lot of customers asking, when did you arrive on site? How many times did you visit us last week, for example? You can automate a lot of this through scheduled reports. We've covered quite a lot here. As you can see, there's a lot of different reports to cover. We'd be here for days if we went through all of them. But the key takeaway is that the beauty of RAM platform being events-based is that there's a lot of potential in what you can report on. So a better question to ask is what's important for your fleet? And the team here will help you scope down a report for something that's specific to you. But also you have a lot of flexibility to play around with a lot of the presets that we've got. Reports, as we know, are super important and valuable to fleets, but what we'd like to change up and talk about next in our workflows module is how you can start to take some of this and automate different actions and alerts based on the events you're receiving. Last but not least, welcome to our workflows module. Workflows allow you to build custom automation and alerts without code. It's drag and drop, they're a lot of fun to use. It basically allows you to start to automate particular actions as your fleet's driving around doing their thing. When we touched on reports a little bit earlier, that was more focused on historically looking back at what had happened. Workflows allows you to take a more proactive action and start to automate the platform to work for you based on what your fleet needs. Best way to explain one is to really jump in and want to have a look. Let's start off with a nice sort of simple one like this geofence timer here. Let's open up our workflow and take a look at our canvas here. On the right side, we've got access to all our different nodes. All you got to do is just go ahead and drag them into the canvas here. And they have different bits of logic or actions that we can start to drag into our workflows. Let's go ahead and get rid of this one for now. Starting with our listener node, which is the node we're going to see at the top here, I like to think of this a bit like a net in the stream. So as our vehicles are driving around, they're doing their thing, generating all sorts of information, we can tell the workflow to listen for something specific. So if we open up our listener node here, for example, we are currently listening for any of our assets exiting a geofence, and we can tell it a specific fence, for example, let's say leaving our home office fence, and we can make it something specific in the fleet. So we might say as well, the vehicle has to have the asset tag northeast. Let's go ahead and hit save. Once it hears those conditions be met, it's going to pass through to the next node. In this instance here, we've got a timer. So it's saying it's waiting for 12 hours. So what this workflow is actually doing is it's listening for us exiting a geofence. It then has a little bit of logic to spice it up to say, has it been 12 hours and I haven't returned to that fence? And then that might be something we want to investigate and do something about. And that ends with our actions here. So we can see we've got an SMS notification, and we're also creating our own custom event, which we can go back and report on. When it comes to our SMS notification, we can go ahead and open up this node. We can change exactly what's in the message. We can choose exactly who we want to send it to. It doesn't even have to be someone on RAN platform. It can be an external contact, maybe a customer or a subcontractor that you want to keep in the loop, or it can be someone that you've already brought on board the system. One of your users that you've already got on board your list here. You can highlight exactly who you want to send this particular alert to. But that's not the only action you can do. We've got other things like email notification. You can use a push notification. An email, similar to an SMS, you can jump in, you can choose anyone you want to receive it. You can jump to the message, customize exactly what you want to see or you want to tell the email recipient. If you really want to get creative with it, we even give you the HTML, so you can really customize it and make it your own. One other thing I'll just quickly show you before we jump to a workflow that's a little bit more complex is this node here, our webhook. So another action that you might be interested in is to start to play around with a little bit of integration and automation with some other systems that you might use. Before I show you what this looks like, an important thing to touch on here that we haven't so far in this demo is that RAN platform is what we call API first. That essentially means that every data point you've seen in the recording today is actually available for integration. We know that because we're proving it. So every single time that you use the platform, we're actually accessing our own API. Without getting too technical, what that really means is that the RAN platform has done a lot of the hard work to be ready for integration already. It's nicely organized and documented, and if you have another platform that you want to start to integrate with, a lot of the hard work's already been done. But before we get too far into it, let's just chat a little bit about a webhook. A webhook is a nice, easy way to start doing some early integration, particularly if it's just one key data point that you want. So following on from our example here, let's say that one of our assets has left a geofence, we've waited 12 hours, it hasn't returned to its depot, we're starting to get worried, we want to take a few actions, we're sending an SMS, we're creating an event, and we can also go ahead and hook up our webhook node, and we can send this event to another system. So let's say you've got a transport management system, you've got a health and safety system, you can go ahead, you've got all your basic API methods here, you've got your authentication, and you can send exactly what you want to this particular system. What this really allows you to do, is very powerful in RAN platform, is to create your own automation, kind of drag and drop as you need it. And you can really start to play around with some different options, both from an integration perspective and also a notification perspective. Emails, SMSs, all of this is available to you. You don't need any code to do it. So believe it or not, that's actually quite a nice simple workflow. Just to give you a little bit of a taste of what they can actually do at their full potential, let's open up one that's got a little bit more going on. For example, this vehicle battery health report. So what this workflow is doing, as you can see, there's a bit more nodes to it. This is listening for all our battery voltage across our fleet. It's then counting if we have a low battery voltage event come through. It's seeing if it happens twice in a row. Maybe if one of our trucks tells us the battery's low, it's going to get driven in the next few days. It's not going to be that big of a problem. But if it happens twice in a row, now we're a bit worried and we want to do something about it. The workflow is then making a decision. So it's saying, well, how low is this battery? Is it actually dead and it needs to be recharged or replaced? Or is it just low and the vehicle needs to be driven pretty soon? It's making that decision. It's creating custom events to let us know that this is occurring. Ultimately, it ends with an email to someone from maintenance saying, hey, the battery might be dead on this particular vehicle. And it also tags the asset in RAN platform, so anyone who's sitting on the system using it throughout the day can go in there and see that this has occurred. A little bit more going on here. Don't worry too much about kind of all the mechanics of it, but really the potential with workflows is to take whatever's important to your fleet and to automate it. So rather than reporting on it historically, you can lead to some sort of action, whether that's an email, an SMS, sending it to another system. All of that is possible without code, and it's designed for any member of the team to come in here, have a play around with it, and start to set up some cool automation. All right, thank you for joining me on a quick tour of RAN platform. Hopefully you can see and you got a little bit excited about some of the functionality that's in the platform. There's a lot there. We've only just scratched the surface today. We'd love the chance to chat more about your fleet in particular and how some of the functionality in the platform can help with some key insights and actions for you.